Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Have a great day.
Hi, I'm Debbie. I'm an alcoholic. And I just want to first thank the committee for inviting me to come here and speak tonight. I can tell you that it is an honor and a privilege. When I received the phone call, I thought it's about time they recognized who I think I am. And my next thought was, oh my God, can I get sick or a pass on doing this? Just to let you know. I want to thank Julie for the introduction and for chairing this meeting. And I am so grateful to be here and to see all of you. I want to recognize, and I may be brought to tears, but, there's Chris and Terry from my old home group in Los Angeles, and it's just so wonderful to see them here. And then I have two women here from my home, one from my home group. By the way, there are only 3 women in my home group, and tonight is our meeting, so Janet will have to hold up the fort for us. Anyway, I am grateful to be here and grateful to be part of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll get into it later, but this conference is very near and dear to me because when I first got here from LA, only a couple months later, I got to be here, and I felt the joy of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm excited. As my friend Kenna used to say, and I don't know if she still says, we have no bad news for you here in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's all good, right? It's all good, and I am grateful to be sober. I'll start by telling you the things that I share at the beginning whenever I speak, and I have a sobriety date, and I think that's very important. My sobriety date is November 25th, 1990. I have a sponsor. Her name is Sandy, and she lives in Northern California, formerly from Montana. And I have a home group, the Caesarea group, in Caesarea, Ontario, just between Lindsay, as you said, Lindsay and Port Perry. And those 3 things are probably the most important things in my life. Anything else that I have is absolutely a direct result of having those 3 things. And I am very grateful. Okay, here we go. Here we go. I'll tell you a little bit about what it was like, what happened for me, and what my life's like today. And then I'll tell you a little bit about what happened again in sobriety and how that's reflected on my life here today. So, by the way, I am from the Greater Toronto area. I grew up in the suburbs of Toronto to a wonderful working-class family. I have parents that absolutely love me, gave me every opportunity that I could have ever wanted. I know when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought, oh boy, I'm in real trouble because everybody else is from a dysfunctional family, and I am the dysfunction in my family. And they gave me everything, and I say that my life was totally perfect for the first 2 years of my life. And then my mother started breeding in rapid succession. And for a selfish and self-centered person like myself, my life turned upside down. I was no longer the center of the universe. And I can tell you, I may not be much, but I'm all I think about, and I want that to be all you think about. And I want it all. You'll hear a little bit about this from me, but my biggest thing growing up was it's not it. It didn't matter what you did for me, what you gave me, how you treated me. If I just had that next thing, it was going to be better. I will tell you a little bit about my personality as a young child, and then I'll move on from there. But I think this will tell you in a nutshell who you're dealing with. I have a younger brother, and when we were 3 years old, I had 4 younger brothers, just so you know. But when my brother next to me was less than a year old, we were downstairs playing, and And all of a sudden, my brother came upstairs, and he was a slow talker. So he started talking in his babbling baby talk that nobody could understand. He just garbled. And you know, what happened after that will tell you who I am. I put my hands on my hips, and I looked at my mother, and I said, he's a liar. And that is what I am saying about me. I take no responsibility for anything I do, and it's always your fault. And I want you to know that and treat me in a special way. As I say, my parents gave me every opportunity, and I think for a while life was pretty good. You know, I was in ballet, baton, piano, everything. And I had a best friend. I call her my first hostage. And we did everything together. And I did not want to have other friends because I didn't want her to have other friends. And life was good. And then what happened at the end of grade 8 is what I believe changed me totally, is that she moved away. And you see, I had no skills for making friends. I had no skills for communicating with other people. I was different from the get-go. You seem to know how to live life, and I didn't get the rule book. I was always thinking about what you were thinking about me. Or what you were thinking about, what I was thinking about, what you were thinking about, what I was thinking about me. And when you are that self-centered, it's very difficult to make friends, because I want to talk about me, and I want you to talk about me, and I want you to want to be around me. And what I found is when you are that self-centered, it's very difficult to make friends. And so what happened at the age of 14, I was in high school, and I felt very isolated and alone, and I didn't know how to make any friends. And I tried to commit suicide with Tylenol. I didn't have any headache, but I did have to go to the hospital and get my stomach pumped. And as a result of that, that loving and caring family that I had decided that they needed to send me to maybe a after-school program at another school where I could learn to make friends. And I did meet a couple of girls, and we decided we would go to a dance. And here's where I get into my drinking, is that we were going to this dance. I'd never drank before. By the way, my parents are the type of people, they will get, and by the way, if you're from the States, you might not know this term, a Mickey. It's like 12 or 13 ounces of alcohol, and 4 people would share that over the night. Now, can you believe that? 4 of them would share it, there might be some left, and then they'd order Chinese food. And everybody, and our great thing as children would be to wake up in the morning to that extra food. Later it would be wake up in the next morning to the rest of the Mickey. But then it was that. And so my parents didn't have any idea about alcohol. They had a full liquor cabinet, and it very rarely got used. So I'm going to this dance with these kids, and, you know, we made a plan. Like every 13 or 14-year-old does, I think 14-year-old does, is that we're going to buy a bottle of wine, right? Because that's what you do when you're 14. At least that's what they did back in my generation, and we were going to share that. Because we tried to go to an outing the week before, and everybody there seemed like they were having fun, and they'd been drinking. And we thought we want to have fun too, because we were sort of the odd kids. I will get into it later. I have a son now who refers to himself as a nerd. We were the nerds. And, but you know, we decided we'd get a bottle of wine, and we all chipped in, and one girl was picking it up, and we were going to have drinks. But you know what makes me different than them? Is that I start thinking. And I'm thinking before I'm drinking. And what I do is I think that there's not going to be enough. I've already justified and rationalized that there's not enough for all of us. Now, how would I know that? I've never seen alcohol really rampant in my family, but somehow intuitively I knew it wasn't enough. And before we went to that dance, I chugged wine. I chugged wine from their cabinet, and I found some liqueurs, you know, that green creme de menthe mixed with blackberry brandy, a little vodka and scotch, and pour it all into a glass. And you're laughing because you've been here, right? You know what that looks like. And I chugged that down, and then I get in my father's car, and I do not know how he did not know that I was in blackout drunk. But somehow I was able to hold it together and get dropped off, and I will tell you that is the last thing I remember was getting into his car. Anyways, apparently what happened is I blacked out, I threw up, I ended up in the hospital, I ended up with an IV in me, and the next morning they had to put me onto dialysis because my kidney functions had shut down for an overdose from alcohol. Now, if alcohol alone was my problem, not alcoholism, as I've been taught in my last home group, I would never have drank after that. But do you know it was never a thought that crossed my mind? What I remembered from the time I was in that liquor cabinet was the feeling that that alcohol had going down. I don't remember the taste, but I do remember that there was something warm and something comfortable. And for this little girl who had tried to commit suicide a couple months before, for the first time I could breathe. And I immediately knew that I was on the same plane as you. And so when I came out of that hospital, it was never an option that I was not going to drink again. Never. I wasn't going to drink blackberry brandy. I wasn't going to drink creme de menthe. By the way, I broke all those rules. I was not going to drink scotch. I was not going to drink this and this and this and this. I was going to change the way I drank. And I don't know how I knew that. You know, a lot of things I talk about up here today, I can articulate because I have gone through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and I have had to look at my drinking. I did not know it so clearly then. All I knew was, when's the next party? Now, I can tell you my parents weren't thinking the same thing. They pulled me from that program. They made sure I didn't go to dances. And they did everything they could to try to manage and control my behavior. But you see, alcohol, that magic elixir, had done something for me that nothing in the world that my parents could do for me could ever have done. You know, and they had done things for me before. They had done all the things. I remember, you know, one year just to make me feel good, my parents had overspent on me at Christmas. They had had a little extra money, and they kept buying presents after presents after presents. And I remember that Christmas getting up in the morning and going to that tree and starting to tear those presents. The first one, the second one, the third one, on to 20, 25 presents. And at the end of it, I started to cry. And my mother said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Because I didn't get this one thing." You see, it doesn't matter what you do for me, give for me, tell me. It's never enough. It's never it. You see, because I have a hole in my soul that alcohol that night filled. And I would have chased that to the ends of the earth if I could. Now, I can tell you a lot of stories, and I'll tell you a couple of them. And the reason I tell them to is because, you know what, at that time I was still an innocent girl. I was an innocent girl who alcohol was working for her. It may not have been working for anybody else around me, but it was working for her. And I had goals and ideals and things I wanted to do in life. You know, I wanted to be a dentist because I'd been to the dental college down here to get braces, and I saw those people, and I thought, I want to be a dentist. And I said I wanted to get married at 21. I don't know where I got 21. You know, back then, that was waiting because, I'm 68 years old now, so that was a long time ago, and I was going to wait till I was 21, and I was going to be pure of soul, pure of body when I got married. Because I wanted that big, beautiful life, you know, the values and morals that I had been brought up with. You know, my parents are good stock. They're good people, and I'd been brought up with that. And I can tell you what happened for me with alcohol, and it didn't happen overnight. I didn't take a drink and end up on Skid Row. You see, what I did is I nickel and dime my life, and I say it's like crossing those lines. I went out to drink the second time. This girl who is going to get married at 21, pure of body, pure of mind, pure of soul. And I wake up the next morning, and I must be engaged, because what happened after that blackout was not pure of body, mind, and soul. And so what do? You know, that guilt and remorse that you feel after you wake up, that I felt, I'm always feeling remorseful. And I have to shut that down. So I justify and rationalize my behavior. I say, you know what? It's the early 1970s, it's 70, 71. People, it's just, you know, it's free love. Everybody's doing everything. You know, I'm just being part of this. And what I did was, because I had to lose one of the things that I valued, I didn't move the line from here to here. I just shifted a little and crossed it. And you know, and every time I broke my parents' heart, and I made another promise and changed a little something, I crossed that line a little further. You know, when I ended up, I'd quit high school, and make a long story short, I ended up getting in. You know the way we are as alcoholics. We can manipulate and get things. I'm going to jump ahead and say, I hear so many people say, if only I'd got what I deserve. Man, I'm so glad I didn't get what I deserve. I have been blessed all along the way. And as an alcoholic, I had to be a very creative thinker. So I found a way to get in through the back door to a university as an adult, you know, a mature student, and I went through a community college, and I ended up at the university. And if anybody, and many of you have been to university, they have some rules there. Like, you can't just not show up for an exam. That's just the way it is. You know, and what I did is that I couldn't show up for an exam because I can't show up. You know, what had been happening is I moved the line, and I'm always in catch-up. And so I don't show up for an exam, so what do? I have to get a doctor's note. So I have to go to the racket club where I'm working and stealing from and get a doctor there who will sign a note for me for favors. And it's always another drunk that's going to do the favors, right? And so I'm getting favors to show up to the course at school, and the line is crossed, and life is getting very busy and complicated, you know, and I'm promising it's going to be different. And I don't know how I got that degree, but I got that degree. Well, I know how I got. Who am I kidding? I took the same courses from professors that I would either sleep with or be their helper. And I would work hard to get one course of an A, and then I wouldn't do another bit of work, and they just automatically assume you're an A student. You know, creative thinking, right, for a drinker. And I always loved the professors that loved to drink. You know, they drink with us and party with us, and our behavior becomes very acceptable. Anyway, so that's how I graduated. And what do? I get a job in advertising. Now, back then in advertising, it was the just say, our only rule at work was you could drink as much as you want. We had a company yacht. We had booze all over the office. You entertained clients. It was like party on. Most people in our office had lost their license at one time. Thank God it was at Bloor and Young. And half of the account executives were taking buses, you know. So you know what it was like to work there. And the only rule was you had to show up the next morning. So whether you were still drunk, had the same clothes on, nobody cared. Just show up. I'm here to tell you I lost that job. Thank you. Another line that I crossed, and I kept crossing lines. I crossed lines to going into mental hospitals. I crossed a line when I went out to Western Canada and ended up in a maximum security prison because no one would pay my bail back here. You know, I kept crossing lines and crossing lines and crossing lines until, as the book says, I could no longer tell the truth from the false, and that the alcoholic life I was leading seemed really normal. You know, it seemed so normal. Where were those dreams? Where were those aspirations? They had long gone. I was getting in trouble, and I am an alcoholic, and I believe in singleness of purpose, but I'm going to say this. I drank in the 70s. So, and by the way, I don't remember the 80s. But drugs were part of my story. I'll just say that. But what I am is I am an alcoholic, and I use drugs to help control and enjoy my drinking. And for a while it worked. And then what happened is that I crossed a line there too. And now I don't know. And now at one point it is so bad. Oh my goodness. I'm like totally, maybe should stand back. I'm at a point where I'm in real trouble with this. I've got people looking for me. I'm running, I went from having an advertising career, and then I went into real estate because now there's less people watching what I'm doing. And then I started selling a product that I was the best customer. I'll just say that. And now I'm in real trouble. Now there are people looking for me. Life is getting a little scary, and I'm at a place where I lived in the suburbs of Toronto. In 1988, I had bullet holes in my house, and you didn't see guns here back then, and the police were there all the time, and it was scary. And so I made a decision that I was going to take a week away and go for a trip. And by the way, my family was very happy to see me gone. They got tired of having to replace telephone poles at their expense through the city of Toronto, and having to clean up the wreckage of my presence. And they helped me pay for that trip for a week to California. And it was going to be different this time. You see, because I had burned every bridge here, and there's people looking for me. Not looking out for me, I should say, looking for me. And so I take that trip to LA, and I go and I visit a girlfriend of mine. She used to be a call girl, but now she's switched professions. And by the way, I want to tell you, at this point, I have stopped using those other substances because I believed they'd become my problem. And I was just going to drink like a normal person. Now, I've never had a normal drink in my life. I'm not saying I was drunk every single time, most of the times, but I could not predict with any certainty, once I took that first drink, what was going to be the circumstances. Sometimes I'd be gone for 2 days. Sometimes I'd be able to show up for dinner. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I'm now going to become a normal drinker. Anyway, I go into LA, and I'm not doing drugs, but my girlfriend has changed careers. She's no longer working for Heidi Fleiss. She is now running a crack house in North Hollywood. And I move in there as the drinker. And life was good. I'm drinking, and nobody's going after my booze, and and I'm okay with them doing their drugs, and I think everything is wonderful. But you know what? Life is getting tough, and I think it's going to be different this time. But after the end of that week, when it's time to go home, I just don't show up at the airport. The party's on one more time. And then within a short time, the people in the crack house want to get rid of me. What was happening was, I can't even hide my bottles. I slept in a back room. I'd had a dirty mattress on the floor. I was not a vision for you. I weighed about 80 pounds. A very close person I used to know, Karen G. She used to say she was the color of squash, and I get that. I was the color of squash, and my eyes were like gone. That vacant look that you have when you're alcoholic in the depths of your disease. That was me. And I'm trying to hide my bottles, and I don't know where to hide them anymore because they don't go to sleep. I pass out. So I start hiding them in the closet, and then I start hiding them in the shower. There was a little shower off there. Now, you know how much I'm showering if the bottles are piling up. And I had every plan to get rid of those bottles. But what would happen is I would say, I'm going to get rid of them down the alley at night. There was a bin for a bar there. And I would drink and wait and drink and wait, and then I would pass out. And those people weren't going to sleep, I'll tell you that. And so those bottles just kept going and going. I was starting to bring unsavory people to the house, drunks, and they were paranoid. And the final straw happened. The final straw is I went to the Rainbow Room one night, hear a band, thought I was having fun. By the way, I never intended to get drunk. I just wanted to get comfortable enough to get social. And no matter how down the scale, low on the scale I went, it never changed for me. I never thought I'm going to end up somewhere else. I'm going to get arrested. I'm going to a nut house. It never occurred to me at the beginning of the night. Anyways, I always love the stories we hear in Alcoholics Anonymous because I heard Vince Y. one time share a story, and I lived that story, and it hooked me. And what happened that night that I went to the Rainbow Room, I got very, very drunk, and they tried to take my keys, but I insisted I could drive. And I came to out of a blackout with something shining behind me. And what it was LA's finest, and they pulled me over, and I got pulled over in that blackout, and what happened is I don't know why they did not put me right in jail, but what they did was I was able to sell myself that I was just visiting from Canada, and I was a sweet little Canadian, and I was lost, and you know, the police knew I was drunk, but he said to me, you know what, just shut up and follow me. And I followed him back to where I lived. And he said something. He said, I'm going to stay outside here. And if you come back out, you go in the house. And if you come back out again, I'm going to arrest you. Now, at that point, you know, in Canada, I'm not even sure our police carry guns. They had rifles in the cars in LA across the back. It was a little scary, you know. I always heard the saying, go to LA on vacation and come back on probation, you know, and they're not lying. Anyways, I walk into this crack house, and I can tell you, they've been peering out that window thinking the police were coming for a very long time. And there they were. And I don't think that guy was waiting for me. You know what happened is he's taking a break. He's calling his wife. He's doing the crossword puzzle. He doesn't want to be back out there on Victory Boulevard. He wants to be safely in this neighborhood quiet, because back then, this was like late 89. Like there were bullets flying back and forth in North Hollywood very regularly. It was just the nature of the environment back then. So I'm sure he was just thinking, I'm just going to sit back here and rest. And those people were not happy. They were pacing and they were peering, and yes, the police were there. So the next morning when I get up, I get the talk, you know, that I've worn out my welcome and that I need to change or I need to go. And, you know, here I am, coming from a good family, living in a good suburban neighborhood. And now I'm in North Hollywood in a crack house being threatened to be kicked out for my drinking. You know, I don't know how I got from there to there. And yet I still didn't see that I was the problem. The last straw came, my parents, who, by the way, my father at the beginning of 1990, you know, there was a big crash in real estate, and my father went bankrupt. And they were very poor, and they had nothing. But they knew I was in trouble, and they said, we're going to come down, and we're going to take you to Hawaii. And they used every credit card they had. One more time they're going to help their daughter. One more time. And we got on that plane, and we went to Hawaii, and within 24 hours, I've ditched them. And I'm now back with the homeless people, and I'm partying for 5 days, 6 days. And the day that we are leaving, I show back up at that hotel, beaten. I had now gone back to some old habits. I haven't been to bed for days. And I just looked at them And they got on the plane, and we got into LAX, and they were supposed to get a hotel room and stay for another day, but they switched their tickets. And I can tell you my whole life, my dad was always yelling at me, just drink less, just have one, can't you just do this? You know, always yelling at me and lecturing at me because he loved me. And they didn't understand alcoholism, but something was different this time. When my parents went to get on that plane, my dad didn't yell at me. My mother didn't say anything. And something inside of me knew that it was over. You see, I'm weighing 80 pounds. I'm the color of squash, as Karen used to say. And my life is really in bad shape, and I'm about to be kicked out of a crack house. And they couldn't see their daughter die. And they had to walk away. The pain, you know, when we say we don't hurt anybody, when I said I didn't hurt anybody out there, the pain that I caused them, that they had to walk their only daughter, their firstborn child, and walk on that plane. And what happened for me is something that I am so grateful for. I went and I drank and I drank and I drank. And I was in and out of blackouts for the next 2 weeks, and I don't know what happened. Well, I do. I sort of know at some point, because my second day sober, some guy knocked on the crack house door to take me on a date. But I was in and out of blackout, and I was just I was in a blackout, but I couldn't get drunk. Have you ever been there? Like you drank, but I couldn't feel drunk. And I think that if alcohol could have shut down my head at that moment, you'd have another person right here today. I wouldn't have cared that my next place was under the bridge at Lancashire. I wouldn't have cared about that. But you see, alcohol was the one thing that shut my head off, and it stopped working. And so what happened was I couldn't shut it off. I couldn't shut it off. And I came to in my little room in the back of the crack house with the threat that I had to leave. And something had shifted. And I don't know why, because I am not the girl that throws out booze. I'm the girl that in the morning goes around and sifts out the cigarette butts out so I can drink the booze out of there. I'm a classy chick, let me tell you. And I poured out half a bottle of wine. And I laid there, and I didn't sleep, and I was in and out, and I laid in that bed as long as I could. And what I did the next day, I called Alcoholics Anonymous out of the phone book. And somebody said, "Can we help you?" And I don't know what your moment of surrender was, but for that one moment, I had a bit of surrender. And I am so grateful that when I had the moment of surrender, I took the action to make the phone call. I laughed because they said, "Can we come and pick you up?" And I thought, no, I need you so desperately, but I can do this on my own. Because you know what? I need you, but don't come near me. I'm like a feral cat. I feed feral cats on my farm, so I know what feral cats are, and I'm one of them. You know, I'll let you close enough, but don't get near me. And so I said, I'll make my way there, and I made it over to the Burbank al-Anon Club, and I was 2 hours early for the meeting. And they had just ended another meeting, and one of the old-timers there, he comes out and he says, "Honey, can I help you? You look like you're new." And I'm thinking, how does he know? Like all of us, right? How does he know? And I am so grateful at that moment. He said, "Come on inside." And he got me inside there, and he got me cleaning up from the last meeting, and then he got me helping him put on the coffee pots, but he didn't give me a pot. I was shaking, and I was nervous, and I don't know if I was having DTs or I was just nervous to be there, but he knew to keep me busy and just keep me moving. And he got me to put out all the little gold little tin ashtrays around the room. We used to smoke back then, and I'm so grateful that the layer of smoke was so thick that no one could see me. And he got me going until the meeting started. And then when that meeting started, I was, I couldn't sit still. I was at the back of the room pacing. But there was something I knew that was magical happening. And I'm one of these people that from day one, from the second I walked into that room, I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous, and I fell in love with you. You were my people. I felt like I had, beam me up, Scotty. I've arrived. Beam me up. I've been beamed up. and I loved you immediately. But I was crazy as all get-go. After that first meeting, it started at 8:30 at night. They used to start at 8:30. And it ended at, all our meetings were an hour and a half. It ended at 10. Those people put me in a car, took me for coffee, and dropped me in Glendale at the midnight wrist slashers meeting. And then after the wrist slashers meeting, they put me in a car and they took me back out to coffee again so that I would be out past when the 7-Eleven stopped selling booze. And then they'd take me back to the crack house. And you know what? I laugh because I sponsor women, and many women complain when I say I'd like you to go to 5 meetings a week. And I was going to 5 meetings a day because a few things that were happening. They had food there, cookies. Well, that was a big thing. They had cookies. Who am I kidding? They had cookies, and I felt safe. And I had somewhere to go that wasn't in the crack house. And many a nights I would go from that crack house, and they would do this every night. And some nights I would phone, and there was this guy, John. He ended up a member of my longtime home group after he had relapsed. But John I'd call John and say, John, I can't stand it here tonight. They're crazy. They are pacing. They're getting loaded. Now it's too hard. And John would come and get me. And John would take me to Patty's, and there's a little restaurant called Patty's in Toluca Lake, and we'd get some cheesecake, and we'd go back to his house, and we would drink coffee, eat cheesecake, and chain smoke. And we would chain smoke until about 6 a.m., at which point he'd say, Debbie, I got to get in the shower and get ready for work. He says, you go sleep in my bed. And they are the gifts of Alcoholics Anonymous. People didn't just say they'd suit up and show up. They showed up. And he did that over and over for me. I recognized something weird one time is that he was drinking cough medicine. And I thought, seems a little odd. Even I figured out that had alcohol in it. And, but I didn't say anything. And you know what I'm come to tell you is that he did go back out there. And when he wanted to get sober, he called me. And he says, where's that group? I ended up in another group. And he says, where's that group? And I said, come on over. And John has been a member of there, I think I don't know, he may still be a member of there. Anyways, I started going to meetings, and I got involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I loved it. And at about 6 months sober, I can tell you it all changed for me. I was more interested in making sure I was at the musicians meeting because it was hip and slick, or I was at the Architects of Adversity, or, somewhere where like the Hollywood people were. Like, come on, I'm some Canadian from the suburbs with nothing going on, but I'm thinking this is where I need to be. I need to be with the hip, slick, and sick people. And I was the sickest of them all. And I started doing all that, and I was unteachable. I couldn't even get someone that would agree to sponsor me in my first year, actually. People thought I was too crazy, and nobody thought I was sober. I was stark, raving, mad sober. But what I did learn is people were going to coffee after the meeting. They were going to everything together, and I just jumped on board the train, as crazy as I was. At 11 months sober, because at 6 months sober, you've heard you don't get a boyfriend in your first year. Of course I did. I got a boyfriend. I got pregnant. I had an ectopic pregnancy rupture. And at 11 and a half months sober, I am in the hospital. I'm in County Hospital in Sylmar. My ectopic pregnancy, tubal pregnancy ruptured. I nearly died in that hospital. They ended up giving me bad blood. I ended up with Hep C, and I could not get released from that hospital. And when I went to get released, the boyfriend had moved in another girl, and he kicked me to the curb. And I had cut away from you people, and the only person left to pick me up from that hospital that day was a girlfriend I'd met in AA who was now drunk on Scope. Her drink of choice when she relapsed. So she picked me up at the hospital. Her breath smelled really good. Her driving, not so good. And we had nowhere to go because he had thrown my stuff to the curb. And by the way, when I was in the hospital, I'd had a little job. I got fired from the job for not showing up. My car, which was in front of his house, got stolen, and now I have nowhere to live. And you know where I moved back into? Yep, the crack house. At 11 and a half months sobriety, I moved back into that crack house. And you know what? They were so happy I was sober. It wasn't for them. They were still doing their thing. But at 1 year sober, I had 5 people from that crack house show up at a meeting to watch me take my first year cake. You know, God is big. God is good. They wanted it more for me than they wanted it for themselves. But they were proud of me and proud of Alcoholics Anonymous. I made the mistake of complaining to somebody at one point about how miserable my life was. I had no job, I had no car, blah, 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 I'm living in a crack house, da, 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 da. And this person, Frank, I'll always remember him, he said to me, Debbie, he said, did you eat today? I said, yes. He said, are you at a meeting today? Yes. He says, do you have a roof over your head today? Yes. He says, am I driving you back and forth to your meeting? I said, yes. He says, then shut your mouth, you selfish, self-centered person, and get a little bit of gratitude. He says, I'm going to take you over to this group in West LA. He said, where there are people, they're very strict there, and they know what to do with you. But we're not going there. And literally dropped me, I swear, this isn't the truth, but it felt like he opened the door and kicked me out on Sunset Boulevard in front of the synagogue for the Pacific Group in West Los Angeles and kept driving. I'm sure he slowed down a little, but it makes a better story if he just drove on by and kicked me out. Anyway, he dropped me there, and what happened for me is something that changed my life, is that nobody felt sorry for me. Everybody welcomed me. Nobody asked me what my feelings were. Nobody asked me what was going on inside of me. Everybody said, do you have a sponsor? They circled all the meetings I had to go to. Circled them. I didn't get to choose. They circled the meetings. They told me to get a commitment at every meeting, and I was going to go to a meeting every day of the week. And they assigned me a sponsor, and what I can tell you is, for the first time in my life, I was teachable. I was surrendered in a different way this time. In a way that wanted it. And you know, those people look so good. You know, they had dress codes there. On Wednesday night, everybody dressed up. And if you had a commitment, you were to wear, women wore dresses, men wore suit and ties when they spoke. And the secretary shook your hand as you walked into the meeting. And the visual proof for me was there. Something magic was working. And I have learned to dress up. You know, what I do when I speak or when I go to a meeting and I have a commitment, if I chair my home group, I dress up. Because you know what? It's out of respect for Alcoholics Anonymous. Because a newcomer may know the only change they may see is how we look. And for me, that was really important. It set me on a path of change and growth. I had a sponsor, Sharon. And I think I'm probably not the craziest person she's ever sponsored, but I will say I'm probably in the top couple. And she got me doing things I never thought I would ever do. You know, she got me, you know, and I at the time thought she was selfish, but like I would be complaining that I had to move and she'd tell me to go buy a golf club for her partner. And I think, this has got nothing to do with me. What do you mean? But what it did is I was so busy resenting her, I forgot about my problems, you know, and things seemed to work out. I got a job back in advertising, and it was a very low-level job, and I was very, you know, I was unhappy. I thought they should know what my value is. Don't you know who I think I am? And I was assistant to people that I didn't think were qualified to be my assistant. And I was not happy. Now, I called Sharon one morning. It was about 8:20 when I called her from the office, and we start at 8. But it's advertising, you know, we're free-flowing in advertising. We just sort of show up. And she asked me, well, what time do you start? I said, well, 8 o'clock, but it's not a firm time. And she listened to me and then listened to my complaining about my career not going anywhere and And I knew I was in trouble because Sharon's the type of person, I'd be driving my car and she'd be screaming at me at the top of her lungs. So when she got really quiet, I knew I was in trouble. And what she said is, well, Debbie, your new call-in time is at 7:40 and it's from your office. And you're to have the coffee made for the entire company. And you're to show up every day on time. And on time means at 7:40 for our call. And you're to have a good attitude. And you're to say please and thank you. And you give them a good day's work for a good day's pay, and even if you don't think it's a good pay. And I was so angry, I thought, oh, I'm never telling her anything again. And what happened is I started doing the actions that she asked me to do. And then they started treating me differently. And I don't know what happened, but I started getting promotions. And I'm going to tell you, if you want to get a good job, treated well at work and get promotions, they don't care about your skill set so much. Show up every day on time with a good attitude and do your best. And it's amazing how that really paid out for me. And what happened with that job is I was there until they sold that company. I was there, I think, 5 years, and they gave me like $60,000 as a gift. I'm like, are you kidding? Like, this is what they do for people that you teach me. This is what they do when Alcoholics Anonymous is in the office. Not for Debbie McGinnis. Debbie doesn't deserve it. Alcoholics Anonymous did it. And what happened was with Sharon, she did so many things, and I will say she only sponsored me for 5 years, and then she fired me, but for good reason. But in those 5 years, everything she taught me still hold true today. I went to do an amend to an ex-boyfriend here in Toronto. I was going to bring a little bit of money. What really was happening is, after we broke up, he went with someone on my softball team, and it took me 5 years to get over him, and I wanted him to see how fabulous I was doing, how fabulous I looked, and I was willing to use every penny I had to get on that plane to go do that amend. I want to tell you, if you want to grow and change, don't do what I did, which is I happened to call my sponsor before getting on the plane. 20? No more, we're done? Oh my God, I didn't even see that. We are done. I've gone over. I will just add, can I have 1 minute? 1 minute, and I apologize. I was looking for the signs and I didn't. Oh, you were over there. I'm sorry. I was looking here. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I want to tell you something. Everything I love, dear to me, is because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to tell you 2 quick things. Those parents that I hurt so badly. My parents were devastated. They were so scared. My mother used to say that she never would answer the phone past 11 at night. Tonight, my mother has Alzheimer's, and I get the privilege of taking care of her today. I get to do for her today what she did for me for 35 years. And lastly, I stopped being I couldn't have children because of that ectopic pregnancy. And 10 years ago, I started fostering children. And as of December 23rd, I'm 68 years old. I finalized an adoption of he's now 11 years old, a boy that has lived on the street, lived in boxes because he lives from a family that was alcoholic. God is good. God is big, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.